I consider the wise and godly ordinances of the Utopians, among whom, with very few laws, all things are so well and advantageously ordered that virtue is esteemed, and yet all things there being held in common, every man has an abundance of everything. Sir Thomas More, Utopia, 1516. Many of us, whether materially satisfied or not, have struggled at times with feelings that our lives are unfulfilled. Could it be that there is supposed to be much more to life than working all our days for the means to live and consume and be entertained? Where is the sense of purpose behind it all? Is there a profound universal need to be close to people, to be completely honest, to share and to work together in harmony as real friends for some noble cause? I recently completed a trip to cooperative communities in the United States, where people are living in ways which they believe add a deep sense of purpose to their lives. This trip actually had its seeds in 1986, when a group of 80 Americans went to the Soviet Union with Barbara Hubbard. Leading Soviets were asked for their vision of the future. The Soviets said that the future they seek is not socialism, which works about 60%. Rather, it's a society in which each gives according to ability and receives according to need, and there is no state. However, they found that the ordinary Soviet is not capable of living that way, so they've put their philosophers to work to find out how to create a new man that can live out those ideals. A new man, meaning a new human, cooperative, spiritually developed, altruistically motivated, striving for utopia. Perhaps some of these new humans already exist, here and now. In 1988, Gorbachev's advisor on U.S. affairs, academician Georgy Arbatov, helped send research fellow Dr. Peter Gladkov, whose dissertation was on American communal movements, to find out how well some Americans have succeeded with intentional communities. Such groups arose out of hundreds of years of attempts to create a utopia. Many Americans have heard about failed historic attempts at communal living, such as Brook Farm, pioneered by intellectuals such as Nathaniel Hawthorne. New Harmony, Indiana, is another historic example of an attempt to create a secular communal utopia. British reformer and industrialist Robert Owen bought the property from the religious followers of George Rapp in 1825. He made serious errors in his enthusiasm to turn the world towards communalism. But he was a great educational reformer, so it is not surprising that his short-lived communal experiment is still taught in our schools, while the far more successful Rappites, who lived communally for almost a century, are practically forgotten. But an even earlier attempt to build God's kingdom on earth began in 1776 and has lasted into the 20th century, leaving a rich heritage of creativity. Guided by the vision of Anne Lee, the Shakers believed that total dedication to God is the way. Sublimating their sexual desires, men and women could work together as sisters and brothers, sharing all that they had with one another and the multitude of orphan children that they adopted. Their motto, hands to work, hearts to God. With a few descendants still living and sharing, it is hard to pinpoint the end of the movement. The failure of so many attempts to create the life of true harmony has left us with the impression that only the competitive system can create the viable, long-lasting culture that has given us the affluence that is the boast of the Western world. Yet we are fearful, and with good reason, that competition could ultimately destroy the planet that gave it birth. But wait, here is an experiment that has not failed. The brothers whom men call Hutterians are living a life of Bible-based Christian community within a tradition that dates back to the early 1500s. So where is Utopia? Why don't cooperative systems work as we dream they should? If the Hutterite communities work so well, why have these concepts not spread further? Well, in fact, they have. In virtually every part of the U.S., Americans are seeking out ways to approach the problems of everyday life cooperatively. There are consumer buying cooperatives where each customer has a share in the ownership and can have a voice in management. As part of membership, each cooperator works for the organization a fixed number of hours per year. The honor system is employed, as each member may weigh, bag, and price the purchase of some items. This congenial cooperative, Weaver's Way, has been working successfully in Philadelphia for 16 years, and there are thousands like it throughout the country. St. Peter's House is a place where 8 people, young and old, live together cooperatively. It is affiliated with National Shared Housing, which arose out of the work of Maggie Kuhn, founder of the Gray Panthers. That group helped older Americans take united action on national needs. Sharing housing helps older people to live at home by cooperating with younger people. Maggie herself is 83, but still active, helping Americans of all ages learn about cooperative systems. Philadelphia Match works with individuals seeking shared housing. They find compatible people who seem likely to get along with one another. What prevents such concepts from working well for large numbers of Americans? Maybe such systems could work for the vast majority, but they just don't know about it. Pennypack Woods, for example, is a cooperative housing development of 1,000 family units in northeast Philadelphia, going well since the early 1940s. People wait several years to join the cooperative because vacancies are rare. There are over 1 million units of cooperative housing in America. Almost all are drug-free.
What co-ops can and have a tremendous potential to do, and what they often do in considerable measure, is to increase the sense of bonding among people and to better the communication, and in so doing produce a better total living environment, not only the housing itself and saving of money, but really a better way to go. In interviewing 4 officers of a co-op right near here, one of them gave a marvelous punchline when asked, well, what do you like about a co-op? She said, this is the way to go. It is the best place to live in Philadelphia because we all know each other. We trust each other, we communicate, we help each other, and our children even reflect this positive attitude.
Dr. Terry Molnar, a founder of the Calvert Social Investment Fund, has been influential in forming a cooperative neighborhood, literally from the ground up. People come and build houses in this Massachusetts village to share in the friendship and security of this lively community.
We think of it as a cooperative neighborhood. We really think that this is possible to be organized in neighborhoods all over the United States in any way, shape, or form, simply by a group of people agreeing to give priority to their agreement to have an identity and then let things happen. The children move throughout the entire 100 and some acres now in 14 houses, most of which are just individually owned houses like any neighborhood. But the children move throughout the entire system as if it's one yard. And if any new person shows up that people don't recognize, everybody kind of feels that they've come to their home, the neighborhood. And so they say, oh, hello, who are you? And if the person doesn't know anybody, well, then people will pay attention. So there's kind of an automatic, natural, effortless safety system in terms of strangers showing up in the neighborhood. And if somebody does know somebody, then everybody says, well, welcome, and how are you? Well, that's interesting. The point I'm trying to make is the fundamental change that I think is going on, that all of our searches in communities and the designing of communities has been about, is how do we create the feeling of family in a way that works, so that this sense of oneness, which I happen to believe is the real assumption, takes form and shape and extension into relationships that work.
In Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and throughout America, cooperatively based community land trusts are developing to combat the skyrocketing cost of land being driven out of reach by speculators.
The Community Land Trust is concerned with the question of human beings, or the role of human beings in relationship to the land. It tries to provide access to the land for both farming, for housing, for all other kinds of human activity on the land. Land prices have been pushed up and up and up as more and more people want to live in a particular place. The other thing that is pushing land prices up is that people are speculating in land on the basis that land is not affected by inflation in the way that other goods are. That is to say, if you want to hedge against inflation, if you want to find some way of owning something that will not lose its value, people see land as that kind of thing. So they go and buy land in order to ensure that they won't lose the value of their money as inflation devalues their money. And this has the effect of a self-fulfilling prophecy. As more and more people go to buy land, it tends to push the price of land up and up and up, so that now we have this situation in which so few people can afford to live on land or to farm or whatever.
Robin Van En has managed this cooperative farm for people who pay in advance for the season's produce and help in other ways.
Every community should have one of these. It should be where, wherever there's a supermarket, there should also be a community-supported agriculture project, too. Here we are in the Berkshires that used to produce 85% of the nation's butter. We're down to, boy, I don't even know, there's probably 7 farms here in South County. This is one of the ways. All those farms are up for grabs and will be developed at any point, probably, but this is one way to just guarantee or you know, put into trust, hopefully, the land. Into agricultural trust to guarantee that there'll be a farm here 10 years from now. You can actually go see a farm. It'll be almost like a museum in the years to come because there just won't be any farms left. This is like anybody's home garden, but cranked up to the scale to feed 130, to do 130 shares, which turns out to be at least 300 people who are getting the food. And it's anything that they would plant in their garden besides a lot of the specialty crops that they've never even tried because they wouldn't attempt them or whatever. So it turns out people are eating a lot more vegetables than they've ever eaten. So here they are creating their own food system by taking that risk off the farmer's shoulders, and the farmer's liberated to do the best job he can possibly do.
Bryn Gwelyd, the best example of a community based on the principles of economist Henry George, resembles other neighborhoods in the Philadelphia suburbs, but many differences will be celebrated at its 50th anniversary in 1990. Before leasing a 2-acre lot and buying a home, an applicant family must visit all 75 families and have less than a 20% opposition in a secret ballot. An extremely wide range of income, net worth, and religion demonstrates that diversity can be cherished for 5 decades. And there are other forms of cooperatives, some with the backing of an organized church, like the Mennonites. By pooling resources, brotherly aid is able to provide a legal alternative to insurance for its members, sometimes at a small fraction of the cost of a commercial insurance company. There are other ways, even more complete, in which modern Americans are helping themselves and one another by living together cooperatively. Here at Innisfree in Virginia is a community that is dedicated to helping the handicapped in a way far more caring than state or private institutions usually manage. Less than an hour from New York City, Fellowship Community is based on the teachings of Rudolf Steiner. He laid the foundations for the community's main tasks, the care of elderly, their unique system of organic agriculture, and natural healing techniques. Printing and publishing of Steiner's books continues here today. Here, in this intergenerational community, there is no retirement, no unemployment. Everyone has work to do, regardless of age or infirmity. Here also, each person works according to ability and receives according to need. And what rules are required are made by the people themselves. So we have seen cooperative systems of all kinds that seem to be working. But none of them, so far, have really been without problems, either hidden or obvious. So where is Utopia? The House of Umoja in Philadelphia effectively ended gang warfare among teens in this city. It started 21 years ago when a widow with 6 children, Sister Falaka Fatah, learned her son was the leader of a gang. To save his life, she invited all 15 of his gang members to move into her home and took on the role of their mom.
We began here 20 years ago, and at the time that I started the House of Umoja, it was basically in response to a gang problem which threatened to take my son's life. I never intended to start a program per se or a community, but it has evolved into an extended family that has touched the lives of thousands of young people.
All right, we stick together. We don't want nothing to happen to nobody. Sister Flock was nice enough, so I'm saying, let us stay here in her home, put food in our stomach. If we need something, we can get it. Now, I respect that lady. I respect her with the bottom of my heart. All right? It's not much to say, but that's basically the truth. That's the truth right here.
SIVA Institute in New York State is a private school run by a board of directors. Teachers and students work together cooperatively to learn about new methods of building and living lightly on the land, in harmony with nature as well as with one another. Students at SIVA learn new methods of agriculture that produce, without any poisonous chemicals, far better quality and greater quantity of crops than anything most modern farmers are aware of.
Dan Carlson's Sonic Bloom is right here. It's a solution made of trace elements and minerals, and it's used in conjunction with playing music, either the oscillator, which sounds like this, or a tape deck, which is music and high-frequency bird sounds in the background. It sounds like this. And what the music does is it opens up the pores in the plants' leaves. And then when you spray the plants with Sonic Bloom spray, they absorb the nutrients immediately and they put it to use. And my observation in the past 7 months has been that it has helped the growth of the plants, increased the growth of the plants, increased the blossoms of particular plants, especially tomatoes, and any fruit flowering vegetables, and I found it to be quite remarkable.
Unlike SIVA, the High Wind Association in Wisconsin is a community run entirely by its members. But here also we find experiments in advanced systems of energy-saving construction, as well as the same type of cooperative agriculture we saw in Massachusetts. Modern communities with different religious outlooks are also proving to be stable and attractive to today's Americans. Surprise! Have the ghosts of the Shakers returned to their old community? Not quite. This original home of the Shakers is now the abode of the Message, a modern community with normal family life in the tradition of the ancient Sufi order.
And when you inherit a huge complex of single rooms, because the Shakers, which were a society that did not marry, lived just in single rooms, it sort of limits what you can do. You can't have a family live in one room. You can't hardly have a couple live in one room. So we're happy to say that that's on the horizon as more very nice living structures inside these old barns.
And we've also built about 10 single-family houses
on the property,
out on the land. So, and that's given then, it's enabled us to decrease the population in the central complex and have more of the people living on their own in single-family houses or in nuclear families, and yet we meet for meals and we meet for prayers and classes and things like that, so it maintains that community dynamic of it too.
With a little more of the village, a little dash of the village tossed in, which really is very healthy.
And everyone in the community pays rent. Everyone in the community works in the community kitchen. There's only 2 exceptions because of health reasons, but everyone, whether you're the director of the community or the most recent community member, all work the same amount in the kitchen, whether you make $15,000 or $35,000 a year, you work in the kitchen the same amount. It's a great equalizer. The community is organized around, or the driving impulse behind the community, or the primary impulse, is the spiritual teachings of the Sufi order in the West. although it's not a requirement to be a member of the Sufi order in order to live in the community. Of course, a majority of the members of the community are members of the Sufi order, this Sufi order. There are many different Sufi orders. But it's not a requirement, and as I say, there are a number of people in the community who are not members of the Sufi order.
This community in Colorado, going for over 40 years, also has branches across America and the world. They are known as the Emissaries of Divine Light and base their lives on the principle of integrity. Not all emissaries live communally, most do not, but all support, one way or another, the educational work of emissary communities, one of which is a demonstration in South Africa of how blacks and whites can work together in harmony.
You're just trying to develop an increasingly cohesive and deep pattern of friendship. And if there's something that's getting in the way of that, you talk about it. But there's also a lot of it is just personal within each individual, where you ask yourself what within your own consciousness needs to be different about this situation and this relationship.
Well, you know, we've got a school. I learn there every day. We study communal living in an atmosphere of play. My teachers are my models. They stand upright and true. Someday I'm gonna be like them and carry my load too.
It might appear that most successful communities consist of the educated children of middle-class families. Is community a possibility for working-class Americans? Daniel Wright is a visionary, a self-educated man. He was a minister in Indianapolis when he experienced a calling from God, which brought him to this valley. The village of Padanaram, often called God's Valley, is a community where people from all walks of life, mostly poor and working class, live together in brotherhood. After 23 years, the valley owns the largest sawmill in Indiana and several states around. Daniel still has the vision of a world covered with rural utopian communities such as his. Is this then utopia? Compared to the life they left outside, some here would affirm that it is. Of the approximately 200 people at Padanaram, perhaps half are children, taught in the community's own school, and most of them were born right here with the help of the community's midwives. Padanaram is certainly a spiritual community, but they have no religious requirement, and anyone, regardless of faith, may join.
A microcosm city that's ruled and governed in justice, in humanity, in principle, in idealism, and absolute freedom of growth for the individual. We take that little slogan, wisdom is our leader, truth is our guide. One law controls this village: love thy neighbor as thyself.
At a Hutterite colony, the minister told us such a community was impossible. We suggested he go there and see for himself. Since the time when the Bible became available to lay people, dedicated believers have sought to go back to the lifestyle described in Acts 4. They were of one mind and one heart, and none said that anything he had was his own, but they held all things in common. Severely persecuted, martyred by hundreds, brave souls called Anabaptists broke from both the Catholic and Protestant